I promise you that our placement here in the ballroom is temporary. You are welcome to take a peek into the sanctuary to see the work in progress. God willing, we'll actually be there at least temporarily in 2 weeks on August 8th. You'll see that the ark will be covered at the time. It's still being worked on, but I promise you that things will be great come Rosh Hashanah in just 7 short weeks. And even during that, even though the chapel's not being worked on, we've moved our morning minyan and evening minyan as well down to the library, which has its own pluses. We could talk about whether we make that move more permanent. But what's interesting about it is that it's in our library, and all of us, rabbis included, sometimes wander out of our eyes and our thoughts. And to have a stack of books for a bibliophile like me is a distraction, but also a friendly, welcome distraction. And so I encourage you to go down there and browse to see all the fiction that's there. And Rona Lupkin's here, who's our librarian. And there's also a lot of Jewish books. And there's a whole wall, the east wall where I face, which I'll call the modern Judaism, or even 20th century Judaism wall. And when you notice that, obviously you see the movement that have developed. Old Mill Road is an example of Reform, Orthodox, and Conservative. I went down in order, didn't want to give any judgment of each one, and how that really encompasses what 20th century Judaism was. And when we think about and study those movements, we have a chicken and egg question. We have philosophy and institution. Which came first? In some ways, the philosophies were the things that came first. Philosophers, even starting into the 17 and 1800s, were trying to seek the truth of Judaism. They have now been haskalah, they've been enlightened, and have lots of different knowledge bases at their moment. And they're trying to think about what is the ideal truth that can apply to all of Klal Yisrael, all of Israel. And those who thought they were on their truth really did try to create communities for everybody. The founding of Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati was supposed to train all American rabbis. The problem was there were some American rabbis that wanted to eat pork and thought they didn't have to keep kosher, and others were saying, no, we have to keep kosher. That's what it means to be Jewish. And so we have our first schism. Conservative, JTS, breaking off of HUC. And then JTS is saying that we can study the text and say that there's human hands in these texts, and that we can have tradition and change. And then another group says that's too much for us, too far for us, and so they move up to into Washington Heights and found Yeshiva University. And so we see different philosophies and all those different writers, Soloveitchik and Borowitz and Kaplan and Heschel, are all downstairs. And so out of that comes institutions. Comes the CCAR, which is the Central Conference of American Rabbis, by the way, and focusing on our movement. The first institutions had just America in their name. It was the United Synagogue of America, the Rabbinical Assembly of America, even though in truth it was just one set of institutions of these 3 big movements. And so we had 3 denominations all claiming that they had the truth. But things have changed. And so I'm going to focus on our movement and say we now have the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism, and we just shortened the Rabbinical Assembly to Rabbinical Assembly. We didn't put of Conservative Judaism. People know that it represents conservative rabbis. Institutions worked well in the 20th century. There was quite a bit of actual social pressure to join synagogues. I remember once meeting an individual at a nursing home. I was just making a pastoral visit. I didn't know these people. And they mentioned how they actually moved to Plainview, Long Island in the 1950s. They weren't planning on creating a synagogue, but their Christian neighbors said, you need a place to pray. You need to belong to a community. And so they built their synagogue. And so many, many people joined synagogues in those post-war years. But trust me, there were also plenty who did not join synagogues in those post-war years, but just enough to really allow those institutions to thrive and many synagogues to be built. But we all know that 2026 is not the same as 1986, 96, 2006, or even 2016, which is when I'm already here at Temple Israel. The reality is we know we had many more B'nai Mitzvah in 2016 than we have in 2026. So does that mean that we are failing? Are we failing as a movement? Or is there hope for the future? I saw a YouTube recently of Rabbi David Wolpe, who is the emeritus rabbi at Sinai Synagogue, who is now really also addressing this question of American Jewry in the 21st century, really in this middle of the 21st century. And he begins with humility. He quotes Ben-Gurion, or the actions of David Ben-Gurion at the founding of the State of Israel, who gave the Haredi community all of the different privileges that we are actually struggling with now. Because he gave them those privileges because he had the assumption and the lack of humility to say, oh, the Haredi community is not going to exist anymore. The secular Jews are going to be the Jews of the future. And we know how that turned out. So he uses that as the humility to say, I can't predict the future. No one can predict the future. But he says, if we put in the work and the effort, there's nothing that's going to prevent us from continuing conservative Judaism. But then he brings up the challenge. He kind of simplifies and said, the Orthodox have it easier. Because when someone says, Rabbi, why do I keep kosher? They can easily just say, because God told us to, and if you don't, you will be punished. But for non-Orthodox, there's much more salesmanship needed. Because if someone presses me and said, Rabbi, if I eat the cheeseburger, am I going to hell? I'm going to say, I don't know. I can't prove without a reasonable doubt that it's God who says, don't eat cheeseburgers. I will say, I find a lot of meaning in not eating cheeseburgers, the same way that my ancestors did. And this Torah that gives us a lot of meaning says to just put some meaningfulness, some notice in how we eat. The cheeseburger is not poisonous. But in our conscious decision to say, I, as a Jew, don't eat the cheeseburger, it brings meaning to our life. So what is the future of conservative Judaism? The answer is that depends on us Jews alone, us members of these institutions. As long as we non-Orthodox Jews revere tradition, but also embrace modernity, and for us, egalitarianism, and also personal autonomy. And we are active in our communities, showing them that they are places of meaning and connection. And yes, we have to be generous with our funds. Then yes, conservative Judaism as a philosophy of living in this sacred center, of saying that modernity has what to offer to humanity, but we also are holding on to our tradition and interpreting it in the way that gives us meaning. Then there will be conservative Judaism. What about our institutions? Our synagogues, our camps, our schools, this United Synagogue, JTS. They're going to have to adapt to thrive. And some of them might have to fold or merge. We know the Dor Vador, God willing, is going to join us, and we're going to make one even better synagogue. We have to adapt for the 2020s, not for the 1980s. And so I can't predict which institutions are going to thrive or not, But as long as we stay committed and put our efforts, and again, our funds, into making sure to teach our next generations to be active Jews seeking meaning, then I have confidence in the future of the Jewish community, and yes, for our segment, conservative Judaism. Shabbat Shalom.